My name is Samantha Hayes. I'm 29 years old, and like most girls, I grew up imagining my wedding. I wasn't the type to dream about castles or princess gowns, but I always pictured one thing clearly: my dad taking my arm, steadying me as I walked toward the man I loved. That moment was supposed to be filled with love, with history, with meaning. But life has a way of teaching you the difference between what you dream and what you actually get. My dad, Richard, was a complicated man. To the outside world, he was charming, always smiling at neighbors, shaking hands at church, telling jokes at cookouts. But inside the family, he was transactional. Everything was a deal, a negotiation, a favor owed. If he gave you something, you paid him back tenfold. If he helped you, you never heard the end of it. And if you wanted something from him, you'd better be ready to pay the price. I always knew that about him. But still, I thought maybe my wedding would be different. Planning the wedding had been stressful enough. Choosing the venue, the dress, managing a budget that felt like it stretched thinner every day. My fiancé, Alex, kept reminding me, "This day is about us, Sam. Not about anyone else." And I wanted to believe that. But I also wanted my family to be part of it, even if they weren't perfect. So when I sat down with my dad one Saturday morning at his favorite diner, I was nervous but hopeful. He stirred his black coffee, barely looking at me as I explained, "Dad, I want you to walk me down the aisle. It would mean a lot to me." For a second, I thought I saw something soften in his face. But then he chuckled, shaking his head. "Sam, you think I just do things for free?" I blinked, confused. "What do you mean? You're my father. This is my wedding." He leaned back in the booth, smirking. "Everything costs, sweetheart. You want me to walk you down the aisle, make a big show of being father of the bride? That's worth at least $5,000. Cash." I thought I misheard him. $5,000? My voice cracked. He shrugged, taking a sip of coffee like he'd just commented on the weather. "That's my price. Otherwise, you can ask your Uncle Dave or whoever else you want. I'm not giving away my Saturday for nothing." I stared at him, my stomach twisting. This was the man who held my hand when I was 5 and taught me to ride a bike. The man I'd once believed would protect me no matter what. And now he was holding my wedding day hostage for money. "Dad," I whispered, tears stinging my eyes, "this isn't a job. This is family. This is supposed to be love." He didn't flinch. "Love doesn't pay the bills." The words hit harder than a slap. I sat there, stunned, while he signaled the waitress for more coffee. The conversation was over for him. For me, something inside broke. When I left the diner, the sun was bright, but I felt cold all over. I called Alex as soon as I got into the car. My voice shook as I told him what happened. He was quiet for a long moment, then said, "Sam, you don't owe him anything. If he can't be there without putting a price on it, then he doesn't deserve to be there at all." I wanted to argue, to say, "But he's my dad." But the words wouldn't come, because Alex was right. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. Every memory of my dad ran through my mind. Birthday parties where he made jokes about what the gifts cost him, Christmas mornings followed by guilt trips, favors that were never free. He had always been this way. Why had I expected my wedding to be any different? By morning, my decision was clear. My dad wasn't going to walk me down the aisle. In fact, he wasn't going to be at the wedding at all. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't going to let guilt or obligation stop me from cutting him out. This was my wedding, my new beginning, and I would not let him sell his way into it. The morning I decided to cut my dad out of the wedding, I felt lighter and heavier at the same time. Lighter because the decision was made. I wasn't going to pay for love, not even from him. He had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. But heavier because I knew this wasn't just about one conversation at a diner. This was about my family, my reputation, and all the fallout that would follow. I didn't tell him right away. Instead, I started with my mom. She called that afternoon, her voice brisk like always. "So, did you talk to your father about walking you down the aisle?" I closed my eyes, steadying my breath. "Yeah, I did. And he told me he would only do it if I paid him." There was silence on the other end, then a sharp laugh. Well, that's your father. He doesn't do anything without getting something back. Mom, I said, my voice trembling. He asked for $5,000. Another pause. Then her tone shifted, cold and dismissive. So? It's his time. His presence. He's the father of the bride. It's a big moment. Why shouldn't he get something out of it? My chest tightened. Because he's my dad. Because it's supposed to mean something. Because it's love, not a business transaction. Her sigh crackled through the phone. Samantha, you're being dramatic. If you really want him there, just pay him. It'll make your life easier. That was the moment I knew my decision wasn't just about him. It was about all of them. My mom had lived under his thumb for decades, and she had learned to justify his greed, his selfishness. She wasn't going to take my side. I gripped the phone tighter.
No, Mom.
I'm not paying him. And if that means he's not there, then so be it. Her gasp was sharp, like I'd cursed in church. You would humiliate your own father like that? On your wedding day? No, I said softly, my voice breaking. He humiliated himself.
She hung up on me.
Word travels fast in families, especially mine. By dinner time, my phone was buzzing with messages from cousins, aunts, and uncles. Some were curious. Is it true you're not letting your dad walk you down the aisle? Others were judgmental. How could you do that to him? A few were downright cruel. You've always been ungrateful. This proves it. I didn't respond. I couldn't. Every message felt like another stone being hurled at me, and I was already bruised enough. That night, Alex sat beside me on the couch, his hand warm over mine. Sam, he said gently, you know this is going to get worse before it gets better. I nodded, my throat tight. I know, but I can't back down. If I cave now, he'll know he owns me forever. Alex's hazel eyes met mine with quiet strength. Then we hold the line together. The next few days were a blur of chaos. My mom sent me a string of voicemails, her voice alternating between pleading and scolding. Samantha, this is family. You're blowing this out of proportion. He's your father, whether you like it or not. Then came the kicker. My dad himself called. I almost didn't pick up, but something inside me wanted to hear his voice, if only to remind myself why I was doing this. Sam, he said, his tone smooth, almost amused. I hear you're throwing a fit about my offer. I clenched my jaw. It wasn't an offer. It was extortion. He chuckled. Big word. But let's be real. You need me more than I need you. You want that picture-perfect wedding moment. You better be ready to pay for it. Otherwise, you'll look like a fool walking down the aisle alone. His words sliced through me, sharp and cruel. For a moment, I almost believed him. Almost. But then I remembered Alex's hand on mine, the way he said, hold the line together. I won't look like a fool, I said firmly. I'll look like a woman who chose to stop being manipulated. You won't be at the wedding, Dad. Not at all. For the first time, his voice lost its smugness. You don't mean that. I do. There was a beat of silence. Then he spat, ungrateful brat, before slamming the phone down. I sat there shaking, tears spilling down my face. But beneath the hurt was something stronger.
Power.
The fallout was immediate. My parents announced to the extended family that I had banned my dad from my wedding. They left out the part where he demanded $5,000. To them, he was the victim, the poor father who only wanted to play his role, and I was the selfish daughter making a spectacle. But slowly, cracks appeared in their narrative. My cousin Jenna messaged me privately. Is it true he asked you for money? When I told her the truth, she wrote back, that's disgusting.
I'm so sorry, Sam.
Another cousin admitted. He pulled something similar at my graduation. Wanted me to buy him a new watch before he'd show up. Piece by piece, the truth started to spread. Not everyone believed me, but some did. And for the first time, I didn't feel completely alone in this fight. As the wedding drew closer, I faced the question I'd been avoiding. Who would walk me down the aisle? Alex's mom offered. My Uncle Dave did too. But one night, as I sat staring at the guest list, I realized something. I didn't need anyone to give me away. I wasn't property. I wasn't a transaction. I was a woman choosing her own future. So I made the choice. I would walk myself down the aisle. When I told Alex, his eyes softened with pride. That's perfect, he said, because you've always stood on your own 2 feet. This just makes it official. I smiled through tears. For once, I wasn't scared of disappointing my dad. I wasn't scared of what people would think. This was my wedding, my moment, my choice. And I was done letting anyone put a price tag on it. The week before the wedding felt like living under a storm cloud. Every day, I woke up wondering where the next strike would come from. Another voicemail from Mom, another rumor spread by Dad, another relative shaking their head at me like I'd just cursed in church. But underneath the noise, something inside me had hardened. I'd spent 29 years twisting myself into knots for my father's approval. Now, for the first time, I wasn't bending. And I wasn't going to break. Still, the pressure was relentless. One afternoon, I was at the bridal boutique for my final fitting when my phone buzzed. It was Aunt Carol, Dad's sister. I almost let it go to voicemail, but guilt tugged at me. I answered. Her voice was sharp, no greeting. Samantha, what's this I hear about you banning your father from your wedding? I swallowed hard, smoothing the white satin of my dress under my fingers. He demanded money to walk me down the aisle, Aunt Carol. $5,000. I said no. She scoffed. That's ridiculous. Your father would never do such a thing. Heat surged up my neck.
He did.
And Mom backed him up. Well, she snapped. Even if that were true, he's still your father. Family is family. You don't just cut him out because of one disagreement. One disagreement. My voice shook, my reflection in the mirror blurring with tears. This isn't about one disagreement. This is about years of him putting a price on everything. This is about me finally saying enough. There was a long pause. Then, cold as ice, she said, if you go through with this, don't expect me or anyone else on our side of the family to show up. The line went dead. I stared at my phone, my chest heaving. For a moment, the weight of it all nearly crushed me. The thought of empty seats on my wedding day, the whispers, the judgment. But then I looked at myself in the mirror, the dress hugging my body, my eyes red but fierce. I whispered to my reflection, better to stand alone than be bought. That night, I sat with Alex on our couch, the glow of the TV flickering across his face. I told him about Aunt Carol's call, about the threats of a family boycott. He listened quietly, then reached for my hand. Sam, let them boycott. Let them stay home. The people who matter, the people who love you without conditions will be there. His words soothed me, but the fear lingered. Would my wedding look half-empty? Would I walk down the aisle into whispers about being a selfish daughter? The fear threatened to drown me, until I remembered something my therapist once told me. Fear loses its power when you name it out loud. So I turned to Alex and said, I'm scared. But I'd rather be scared and free than comfortable and controlled. He kissed my hand. That's the woman I'm marrying. The next blow came at the rehearsal dinner. We kept it small, just the wedding party and close friends. I was nervous, but trying to enjoy the evening when my cousin Jenna pulled me aside. She glanced around before whispering, Sam, I need to tell you something. Your dad's been telling people he's going to show up anyway. My stomach dropped. What? He says no one can stop him, that it's his right as your father. She looked at me, with sympathy. I thought you should know. My heart pounded. The image of him striding into the ceremony uninvited, making a scene in front of everyone, it made me feel sick. I pressed a hand to my chest, breathing shallowly.
Thank you, Jenna.
For telling me. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, the shadows stretching long across the room. I pictured Dad barging in, demanding attention, making everything about him. The thought terrified me. But beneath the fear, anger burned hotter. This was my day, my choice, my life. And no one, not even him, was going to steal it from me. The morning of the wedding, I woke up before dawn. The world outside was still and quiet, the first streaks of sunlight brushing the horizon. I slipped into a robe and stepped out onto Aunt Linda's porch, hugging myself against the morning chill. She joined me a few minutes later, holding 2 mugs of coffee. She handed one to me, her eyes soft. "Nervous?" she asked. "Terrified," I admitted, blowing on the steam. "But also ready." She smiled. "That's the right combination." I sipped the coffee, letting the warmth steady me. "Do you think people will hate me for this? For cutting Dad out?" Her gaze was steady. "Some will. Some already do. But the people who matter, Samantha, will respect you. And more importantly, you'll respect yourself. That's worth more than their approval." Her words sink deep, wrapping around the fragile parts of me like armor. By noon, the bridal suite at the venue was buzzing with activity. Bridesmaids chattered, makeup brushes swirled. The scent of hairspray filled the air. I sat at the vanity, chestnut waves pinned back, my dress hanging on the door behind me. But even in the flurry of excitement, the weight of what I was about to do pressed heavy on my chest. A knock at the door startled me. Aunt Linda peeked in, her eyes serious. "Sam, I need to talk to you." My stomach tightened. "What is it?" She stepped inside, lowering her voice. "Your dad's outside. He showed up." The room spun. "What?" "He's in the parking lot. The staff won't let him in without your approval. But he's making a scene." I gripped the edge of the vanity, my hazel eyes wide in the mirror. For a moment, the little girl in me wanted to cave, wanted to let him in, wanted to avoid the confrontation. But then I remembered the diner. His smirk. $5,000. I stood, my robe swishing around my legs. My voice shook, but the words were steel. "Don't let him in." Linda nodded, pride flickering in her eyes. "I'll handle it." As she left, I sank back into the chair, my body trembling. My bridesmaids looked at me, concern etched on their faces. "You okay?" one asked gently. I nodded, though my voice cracked.
Yeah.
"I'm okay. This is what I chose." And as I stared at my reflection, chestnut hair framing my determined face, I knew I meant it. This was my wedding. And he was not invited. When I was little, I always imagined my wedding day as a blur of excitement, flowers, music, laughter, and that surreal moment of walking down the aisle on my father's arm. I never pictured fear. I never pictured security guards standing at the entrance of the venue. I never pictured my stomach twisting with dread at the thought of whether my own dad would cause a scene. But that's what my morning looked like. The bridal suite was buzzing with the energy of my bridesmaids, but I couldn't shake the knot in my stomach. Every time I heard a door slam or footsteps in the hallway, my chest tightened. What if he got past the staff? What if he barged in mid-ceremony? Aunt Linda came back from outside just before noon. Her expression told me everything. "He tried to force his way in," she whispered, closing the door behind her. "Security stopped him. He yelled, cursed, told everyone you were an ungrateful brat. But he's gone now. They made sure of it." I swallowed hard, my hazel eyes stinging with tears. "Thank you for keeping him out." She hugged me gently, mindful of my makeup. "He can't touch you anymore, Samantha. Today is yours." Her words settled into me like an anchor. He couldn't touch me anymore, not my choices, not my happiness, not my future. By the time the ceremony began, the sun was streaming golden light across the garden. Rows of chairs lined the aisle, filled with friends, Alex's family, and the relatives who hadn't abandoned me. The air was warm, scented with roses from the floral arch waiting at the altar. But as I stood at the top of the aisle, dress flowing around me, my heart pounded in my chest. Not because of Alex. I had no doubts about marrying him, but because of the empty space at my side. For a second, I felt the ache of what I had lost. The father I once hoped for, the man I wished he could have been. But then I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and reminded myself, I wasn't being given away. I was choosing. Choosing Alex. Choosing myself. Choosing freedom. The music swelled. Guests rose to their feet. And I began to walk. Every step echoed with years of pain and years of survival. I could almost hear my dad's mocking voice, telling me I'd look like a fool walking alone. But as I moved down the aisle, something unexpected happened. People smiled. They clapped softly. And then one by one, some of my closest friends, cousins, and even Aunt Linda stood. Not to walk with me, but to show me I wasn't alone. I blinked back tears as I continued, my hazel eyes fixed on Alex at the altar. He was waiting with tears in his own eyes, his hand over his heart. And when I finally reached him, breathless and trembling, he whispered, "You were never alone." The ceremony itself was simple, but beautiful. Our vows were filled with promises of honesty, partnership, and love without conditions. Love that wasn't for sale. Love that didn't come with strings. When we kissed, the crowd erupted in cheers. And for a moment, I forgot about my dad entirely. At the reception, laughter and music filled the room. For the first time in months, I felt joy untainted by fear. But as I danced with Alex, a thought lingered. What will happen now? Would my dad try again to worm his way back into my life? Would my mom continue to side with him? Would more relatives cut me off? Later, as the cake was cut and toasts were made, Aunt Linda pulled me aside. "You did it," she said, her eyes shining. "You walked yourself down that aisle, Sam. You showed everyone that you don't need him, that you never did." I hugged her tightly, tears brimming in my hazel eyes. It still hurts, though. Part of me wanted him to be proud, to see me happy. She stroked my hair gently. "Of course it hurts. You're human. But his absence doesn't diminish you. It defines him." Her words sank deep. I realized then that the shame I carried wasn't mine. It was his. He was the one who put a price tag on love. He was the one who chose money over family. And he would have to live with that. As the night wore on, I looked around the room. People were laughing, dancing, clinking glasses. Alex was laughing with his groomsmen, his eyes lighting up every time they landed on me. I thought about how different this could have been if I had caved. If I had handed my father $5,000 for the privilege of walking beside me. He would have smirked, acted like the hero, soaked in the applause, while I knew the truth. But instead, here I was.
Free. Married.
Surrounded by people who loved me without conditions. When the DJ called for the father-daughter dance, a hush fell over the crowd. For a second, my chest tightened. But then, before I could sink into regret, Aunt Linda stood. She walked over, smiling, and held out her hand. "Dance with me?" she asked. Tears spilled down my cheeks as I nodded. We danced slowly, her arms strong around me, the crowd clapping in support. It wasn't the dance I had imagined as a child. It was better, because it was real. Later that night, after the last guests had left and the venue was quiet, I stood on the balcony of the bridal suite, looking out at the stars. Alex wrapped his arms around me from behind, resting his chin on my shoulder. "You okay?" he whispered. I nodded slowly.
"Yeah, I think I am."
For the first time in a long time. He kissed my temple. "You were incredible today." I smiled faintly, leaning into him. I just kept thinking he said I'd look like a fool walking alone. But I didn't. Did I? Alex shook his head firmly.
"No."
"You looked like the bravest woman I've ever seen." And as I gazed at the night sky, hazel eyes reflecting the stars, I realized something. My wedding hadn't been ruined by my father's absence. It had been saved by it. Because sometimes the people you cut out of your life are the very ones who are holding you back from living it. The morning after the wedding, I woke up in the quiet glow of our hotel room, sunlight spilling through the curtains. For a brief, blissful moment, I forgot about everything. My dad, my mom, the drama. It was just me and Alex, rings on our fingers, hearts still racing from the joy of the night before. But reality never stays away for long. My phone was buzzing on the nightstand, the screen filled with missed calls and unread messages. I knew without looking who they were from. My stomach tightened, but I ignored it, rolling over to press my face into Alex's chest. "Don't check it," he murmured, running his hand through my hair. "They can wait. Today is ours." And for a while, I let myself believe that. We had breakfast in bed, laughed about the dance floor disasters, replayed the way his vows had made half the crowd cry. For a few hours, I was just a bride. But eventually, curiosity got the better of me. I opened my phone. The first message was from my mother. You humiliated your father. I hope you're proud of yourself. Another from Aunt Carol. The whole family is talking. Everyone thinks you were cruel. And then, the one that made my blood run cold. From Dad himself. Enjoy your little moment, Samantha. You'll regret cutting me out. Families don't forget betrayal. I sat frozen, the words burning into me. Alex took the phone gently from my hands, reading them himself.
His jaw tightened.
He's lashing out because you didn't play his game. He can't stand that you didn't pay his price. But the whole family, my voice cracked. They think I'm the villain. Alex cupped my face, his hazel eyes steady. Sam, listen to me. Anyone who thinks you should have paid your father to love you is not worth your energy. You don't need their approval. You already have everything you need. His words steadied me, but the ache lingered. When we returned from the short honeymoon a week later, the storm had only grown. My parents had gone on a campaign, telling anyone who would listen that I had banned my father from the wedding out of spite. The truth, that he had demanded money, was conveniently left out. At the grocery store, I overheard whispers. That's the girl who wouldn't let her dad walk her down the aisle. On social media, I saw passive-aggressive posts from relatives. Some people forget where they come from. It was like a scarlet letter I couldn't scrub off. One afternoon, as I pushed a cart through the produce aisle, I spotted Aunt Carol. She gave me a look of pure disdain before turning her back. The sting was sharp, but instead of crumbling, I straightened my shoulders and kept walking. Because the truth was, I hadn't forgotten where I came from. I just refused to stay there. The breaking point came 2 weeks later, when I received a letter in the mail. It was from my dad. Sam, you've embarrassed this family. You made me look weak. If you think I'm going to forgive you for this, you're wrong. Don't bother calling when you realize you've destroyed your own relationships. I won't be here.
Dad.
I read it 3 times, my hands trembling. The words were cold, final. For years, I had begged for scraps of approval from him. And here he was cutting me off like I was nothing. But instead of collapsing, I felt something unexpected. Relief. I realized then that I had been waiting my whole life for my father to choose me. To love me without conditions. And he never would. That wasn't who he was. So maybe it was time I stopped waiting. I took the letter, folded it neatly, and slid it into a drawer. Not as a keepsake, but as a reminder. A reminder of why I walked myself down that aisle. Of course, not everyone believed my dad's version of events. Slowly, a different narrative began to emerge. My cousin Jenna defended me on social media, writing, "Funny how people forget the details. Sam didn't ban her dad, he tried to charge her. That's the real story." Others messaged me privately, "We always wondered about the way he treated you. Now it makes sense." The tide didn't completely turn, but it shifted enough that I didn't feel so isolated anymore. One evening, Aunt Linda sat across from me at her kitchen table, sipping tea. "You know what, Sam," she said, her voice warm. "What you did was brave. You broke the pattern. You refused to let him keep pulling the strings. That takes strength most people don't have." Her words sank deep. She was right. My whole life had been about appeasing him, paying his emotional tolls. And for once, I had said no. It hurt. God, it hurt. But it was also freeing. As the weeks turned into months, I started to rebuild. Therapy helped me unpack the years of manipulation. Alex stood by me through every rumor, every cutting message, every moment of doubt. And slowly, I learned to stop apologizing for choosing myself. When people whispered at the grocery store, I held my head higher. When relatives unfriended me online, I let them go. When Mom left another voicemail dripping with guilt, I deleted it without listening. Because I had finally realized I wasn't the villain of this story. I was the survivor. One evening, Alex and I sat on our porch, the sun setting in a wash of orange and pink. He reached for my hand. "Do you ever regret it? Cutting him out?" I thought for a long moment. Sometimes, I admitted. Not because I think I was wrong, but because part of me still wishes he had been different. That he had wanted to walk me down the aisle for love, not money. Alex squeezed my hand. "That part of you is grieving the father you deserved. But you did the right thing with the father you had. Tears filled my hazel eyes as I leaned into him. He was right. And as painful as it was, I knew I'd never trade my choice. Because in the end, I hadn't just walked myself down that aisle. I'd walked out of a shadow. 2 months passed, and the noise around my wedding began to fade. The whispers at the grocery store grew quieter. The family gossip shifted to other topics: who was pregnant, who was moving, who was divorcing. But for me, the echoes of that day never really left. They lived inside me, woven into the way I carried myself, the way I looked at my reflection in the mirror. I had walked myself down the aisle. I had cut my father out. And though it came with scars, it also came with something I'd never had before: freedom. Therapy helped. At first, it was awkward, sitting across from a stranger, pouring out decades of resentment and pain. But as the weeks went on, I found myself peeling back layers I didn't even know existed. I confessed how much it hurt that Mom had sided with him, how I felt like I'd lost not just a father, but a mother too. My therapist leaned in one afternoon, her voice calm but piercing. "Samantha, you didn't lose them at the wedding. You lost them the moment they decided love came with conditions. What you did at the wedding was accept that truth and stop bargaining with it." Her words shook me, because she was right. I had spent years trying to negotiate love from them, like bartering at a market. But love isn't earned by paying a toll. It's either given freely, or it's not love at all. Meanwhile, Alex's family became my shelter. His mom, Julie, called me every week just to check in. His dad sent me photos of their dog in ridiculous sweaters, just to make me smile. And Alex himself, well, he never let me forget that I was enough. One evening, after dinner at his parents' house, Julie pulled me aside. "Sweetheart," she said, her hand warm on mine, "I know you've lost a lot, but I want you to know, you've gained us. You're family now. Not because you earned it, not because you paid for it, but because you deserve it." I broke down crying right there in her kitchen. Because for the first time in a long time, I felt like someone wanted me simply for me. Of course, my parents didn't vanish from the picture. Dad's anger simmered, spreading like poison through the family tree. He tried to keep his grip on the narrative, telling anyone who'd listen that I was selfish, cruel, disrespectful. But cracks started to show. One afternoon, I got a text from my cousin Jenna. "You'll never believe this. Uncle Richard tried the same thing with Mark, said he wouldn't come to his promotion party unless Mark paid for his plane ticket." I stared at the message, my chest tightening. It wasn't just me. He was pulling the same tricks everywhere, demanding payment for presents. Another cousin later messaged, "We used to think you were exaggerating. Now we see it. He really does put a price on everything." Piece by piece, the image of my father as the respectable family man began to crumble. And for once, I didn't feel like the black sheep anymore. One Sunday, Alex and I went to brunch with a small group of friends. As I told them about the latest family drama, my friend Marissa shook her head. "Sam, you've got to see this for what it is. You broke his cycle. He thrived on controlling people with guilt and money. You walked away. That's why he's so furious, because you did what none of them could." Her words hit me like a revelation. I hadn't just stood up for myself. I had broken a pattern generations deep. My dad controlled, my mom enabled, the family excused. But I had said no, and that no had rippled through the family like an earthquake. Of course, healing wasn't a straight line. There were nights I still cried myself to sleep, mourning the father I never had. There were days I still reached for my phone, wanting to call my mom, only to remember she had chosen him over me. But slowly, those moments hurt less, and other moments began to shine brighter. Like the afternoon Alex and I went hiking, and I stood on a cliff overlooking the valley, the wind whipping through my hair. I felt small and infinite all at once, and I thought, I walked through fire and I'm still here. Or the night we had friends over for dinner, and I laughed so hard my sides hurt. For a second, I caught myself thinking, I wish Dad could see this.
But then I stopped. No.
He didn't deserve to see me like this.
Whole. Happy. Free.
Then came the news I didn't expect. My dad lost his job. Word spread quickly: budget cuts, layoffs at the company. Suddenly, the man who had lorded money over everyone else didn't have any. I waited for the wave of schadenfreude, the satisfaction of seeing karma finally bite. But what I felt instead was something quieter. Clarity. Because money had always been his weapon. It was how he controlled Mom, how he manipulated the family, how he tried to control me. And now, stripped of it, he had nothing left but his pride. I thought he might call me then, humbled, ready to make peace. But he didn't. And that was when I truly understood. He would rather starve than admit he was wrong. And that wasn't my burden to carry anymore. One evening, I sat on the porch with Aunt Linda. The cicadas buzzed in the humid air, and we sipped iced tea while the sun dipped low. "You know what I realized today?" I said softly. "What's that, sweetheart?" she asked. "I used to think cutting Dad out meant I'd be empty, like I'd lost something essential. But now, I see that cutting him out made room. Room for Alex's family. Room for friends who care. Room for peace." Linda smiled, her eyes warm. Sometimes letting go isn't about losing. It's about making space for the right things to grow. I leaned back in my chair, the weight on my chest finally easing. For the first time in years, I felt like my story wasn't defined by what my father took from me. It was defined by what I chose to keep and what I chose to build. It's strange how endings feel so much like beginnings. 4 months after the wedding, I kept waiting for the final blow from my father. The phone call, the confrontation, the apology that would never come. But none of it arrived. Just silence. Heavy, stubborn silence. And slowly, I realized the silence wasn't punishment. It was freedom. I had braced myself for the grief of losing him. What I didn't expect was the relief of gaining myself. Life moved forward. Alex and I settled into our first year of marriage, our home slowly filling with photographs and little traditions of our own. Friday night movie marathons. Saturday morning pancakes. Long walks on Sundays where we dreamed about the future, not in the shadow of anyone else's expectations, but our own. The ghost of my father lingered at times. When I saw another bride on social media being walked down the aisle, a pang of sadness would hit. Not envy, just grief for the father I never had. The father who should have been proud, who should have wanted nothing more than to see his daughter happy. But instead of drowning in that grief, I started letting it teach me. I realized that what my father failed to give me was exactly what I had vowed to give myself. Unconditional love, respect, and value. And in a way, I was grateful, because his absence had forced me to step into my own strength. My mother never came around. She stayed by his side, loyal to the bitter end, echoing his excuses, defending his pride. At first, that hurt even more than his betrayal. But eventually, I stopped expecting anything different. One day, I deleted the last voicemail she had left me, her voice sharp, accusing, dripping with guilt trips. And when I pressed delete, I felt lighter, like I'd taken off a jacket that never fit. I didn't need her permission to live my life. I didn't need her blessing to be happy. The biggest change came not from family but from myself. I stopped apologizing for cutting people out of my life who refused to love me the way I deserved. I stopped explaining my choices to those who would never understand. I stopped begging for scraps of approval. Instead, I invested in the people who showed up without conditions. Alex's family, who welcomed me without hesitation. Friends who celebrated my victories and sat with me in my lows. Aunt Linda, who had been my rock since day one. One evening, Julie, Alex's mom, hosted a family dinner. She served a ridiculous feast, laughter bouncing off the walls. At one point, she reached over, patted my hand, and said, "You're my daughter now. Not by blood, but by love." Tears filled my eyes. Because in that moment, I realized I hadn't lost a family. I had built a new one. Months later, I stood at the same mirror I had stared into on my wedding morning. This time, I wasn't wearing a gown. Just jeans and a sweater, my hair down, my hazel eyes steady. I remembered the fear I'd felt then, wondering if I'd look foolish walking alone. And now, looking at my reflection, I whispered the words I wished that trembling bride could have heard. You weren't walking alone. You were walking into yourself. The final closure came unexpectedly. It was spring when I ran into Aunt Carol at the farmer's market. I braced for the icy look, the cutting remark. But instead, she looked tired. Her voice was softer when she said, "We don't see your father much anymore. People have started pulling away. He's difficult, without the money." I nodded slowly. He always was. She studied me for a moment, then sighed. You were braver than the rest of us. We all played along. You didn't.
I didn't know what to say.
For so long, I had been the villain in their story. To hear even a flicker of acknowledgement felt like a quiet victory. I walked away from that conversation lighter. Not because I needed her approval, but because it confirmed what I already knew. I had broken the cycle. Sometimes, late at night, I still dream about walking down that aisle. Not the way it actually happened, but the way I once imagined it, my father at my side, his hands steady, his eyes proud. When I wake, there's a hollow ache. But then I roll over and see Alex beside me, his face peaceful in sleep, and I remember, I didn't lose a father that day. I gained a partner who chose me every single day, without condition. And more importantly, I chose myself. I tell this story not to shame my father, not to dwell on pain, but to remind anyone listening of this, love is not a transaction. Family is not a debt. And you are not required to pay for someone's pride at the expense of your peace. If I had caved, if I had handed over that money, maybe my wedding photos would have looked picture perfect. Maybe people would have whispered less. But I would have known the truth. I would have walked down that aisle with a price tag dangling from my wrist. Instead, I walked free. And that walk was the most important step I've ever taken. So when people ask me now, did you regret not having your dad at your wedding? I smile and shake my head, because the answer is no. I didn't lose a father that day. I lost the illusion of one. And in its place, I gained a truth more powerful than anything he could have given me. I am enough on my own.